Now I have a very special garden tour for you today. It's the very first garden tour right here on the homestead at Kowalski Mountain, and I can't wait to show you the good and the pretty ugly. Hey friends, it's Barbara Sue at Kowalski Mountain and welcome back to our channel. Now if you're new to our channel, you might be confused to see garden tours from Garden Zone 9A and a garden tour from Garden Zone 6B. And there's a really good reason for that. Now, Philip and I live in Central Florida, which is Garden Zone 9A, and that's where we do most of our current gardening. However, we own 68 acres of beautiful countryside here in western Kentucky, which is Garden Zone 6B. Now, Philip purchased this property back in 2016, and we've been working towards the goal of moving here. Little by little, through what we call workations, we build the homestead. And together, Philip and I have done quite a bit of work here. When I met Philip in 2018, there was a single portable garage here on the property, and that was it. But together, we've built the barn, we've built the bathhouse, and especially in the last year, we are taking big steps forward with the completion of the driveway and our attempt at the pond. Now the pond, it's got its own issues, but we're gonna get that fixed. Philip and I have always planted things up here since the very first year I came up here. We've certainly changed the way we do it. The very first year, we used a homemade plow that we pulled behind the four-wheeler that one of us had to ride in order to plow up the ground. And we planted a few things. We've harvested a few things up here, green beans and pumpkins and just a little bit of things here and there. And I call it gardening on grace. We plant whatever it is we plant on a workation, and then we're gone for maybe a month, maybe 2 months, maybe longer. And whatever we plant is completely on its own. We don't water it, we don't weed it, we don't take care of it in any way, and we just hope that something grows. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. But today, we have a legit garden tour right here from Kowalski Mountain, and I can't wait to show you. Now, the first part of the garden tour is here in the pumpkin patch, and I'm gonna be honest, I really didn't want to plant anything here in Kentucky this year. We always do, and it just takes work. So when we're up here, we have to spend time on it that I would like to do other things. But Philip insisted on doing a garden here in Kentucky this year, which I guess is fair because I insisted on doing one in Florida. So we both got the garden that we wanted. Now this year, so far, the garden here in Kentucky is looking gorgeous. And if you can see behind me, this pumpkin patch looks amazing. Honestly, I don't know how it looks so amazing because we haven't had a lot of time to take care of it. Philip has been up here. I'll put on the screen when this was planted. And he's been up here one other time in between where he did some weeding and taking care of it. And it just looks phenomenal. Now behind me here in the pumpkin patch, we have pumpkins. Some grocery store pumpkins. Every year our family does a pumpkin carving contest. And Philip keeps the seeds. So some of these are the seeds that came out of those grocery store pumpkins, but there's also some sugar pumpkins behind me as well, and I think I saw some giant pumpkins in the list as well. Now additionally, there are sunflowers and cantaloupe in this field, as well as some marigolds. And there's one other thing that we put in this garden just today that isn't going to stay here. It just needs a place to sit until we can take care of it. Let's get a closer look. Now I am just so impressed with how this looks. It's had very minimal care, but it is doing awesome. And this garden is also not protected from the deer in any way. So we'll see. I looked earlier to try to find a pumpkin to show you, and I haven't found any pumpkins yet. Now we also have some sunflowers spaced out here. That's a sunflower, as well as that. And then a row over, we've got the cantaloupe. Now we get a little bit spoiled in Florida. We actually plant our garden in February. So this time of year our garden is really wrapping up in Garden Zone 9A. But here in Kentucky, they're just starting to get really going. Here's some more sunflowers. Now over here we have some marigolds. And of course we have to grow things for our bees. Now right here behind me are the grapes, and this is not the vineyard. Now Philip likes to plan ahead, and grapes take time to mature. So these grapes we've purchased, and we've been babying them a little, but we need to get them in the ground so that they can be established here, because our plan is to move here this fall. The vineyard will not be here in the potato patch. It's just a wet piece of ground that should stay moist enough to support these grapes until we can plant them properly in the spring. This one even has some grapes already. The deer should like that. There are 7 grape plants here, and this ground should stay wet enough to support them for now. Now the next part of the garden tour is going to be through the orchard. Now one of the things that the experts will tell you, if you can't do anything else, plant trees. And that's exactly what we've done. Now I will have to go back to the archives and tell you when we planted the very first trees here on Kowalski Mountain. We're going to take a look at them. But Philip and I planted a couple of apple trees, one of our earliest years that I came to the farm. We made some mistakes with those trees. We didn't protect them. So we planted them and they lived. They're actually still alive, but we didn't protect them, and the deer were really rough on them. They like to rub their antlers on them during the season called the rut, and they about killed them. But they have survived. Now behind me is a peach tree. We have 4 peach trees here on the property. We have some plum, and we have a bunch of apple. I don't even know how many. We'll take a count. This peach tree right here behind me fell down during the storms that Kentucky has had recently, and it's still alive. It just tipped it over. And so I strapped it back up, and hopefully it will recover well. There were actually 2 trees that fell over, and I did an entire video of how I strapped them up so that they will be able to recover and hopefully get their own balance, so that we can remove the straps so that they will grow properly. Now this time of year, the Japanese beetles are the nemesis of the grove, and I'm sure we're gonna see some. Let's just take a walk through the fruit. I don't know what to call it. Is it a grove or an orchard? In Florida, we have orange groves, they have apple orchards, but what are peach gardens? What do they call those? I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to look it up because I don't know how to call it. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of our fruit trees. This is the other tree that I had to strap up. Now this little tree does not look so hot. This is a persimmon tree, and we planted this tree in memory of our neighbor Robert Duvall when he passed away. And Robert was really great to us. The Duvalls have always been amazing to us as neighbors, and when Robert was alive, he would take care of the property for us. He would mow it before we got here, and let me tell you, that was amazing, because we would come up here, everything would be mowed, it would be awesome, and now it takes Philip days to do the same job that Robert would do before we arrived, and it helps with ticks and all kinds of issues, and oh, it's the number one thing that I miss him doing for us. But he was a wonderful person. He would give you the shirt off his back. Now Patty is still our neighbor, and we so appreciate her still. The Duvall family, they are just salt of the earth people, wonderful people, and just precious neighbors to us. Now this tree we planted in memory of Robert, and it looks terrible, but there is some green on it, so let's look at that. I thought for sure this tree had died, but it is trying its best to come back. Now if you notice, right here, the Japanese beetles are just not being kind. But this tree is doing its best. Now we've put out some traps for the Japanese beetles. These use a bait. And I don't know if you can see down in there. It's kind of gross. But it has a little packet on it that's just irresistible to those Japanese beetles. And they fall down inside, and there they stay. They can't get out. We reuse these bags, so we put new bait on them. But at the end of the season, we just dump out all those nasty bugs and rehang them. Now the last two trees here are the plum trees. And they also have a lot of Japanese beetle damage. Let's take a closer look. You can see what those beetles just do to it. They're ravaging our poor trees. And unfortunately, they do the same to the fruit. So we've really got to come up with ways to manage the Japanese beetles. Here comes my farmer now. He's the one with the green thumb. Now this little tree was one of the first apple trees that we planted, and I know it doesn't look like all that, but it has been through a lot. The deer knocked it down and about killed it. We also had to relocate it to put in the driveway, and I actually think the deer might have gotten it more than 1 year. So it's doing its best. No matter how poorly we've really taken care of this tree, it is doing its best to grow. Now at that time we planted another tree and it's doing really well. Let's go look at it. Now this is the other tree we planted that first year, and it looks amazing. Now this spring when we were here, it was gorgeous. I'm going to put a picture of how lovely it looked this spring. It was covered with blossoms. Beautiful. I'm so glad I didn't miss it. And after all those blossoms, there's one little apple on this tree. Now, it's not the prettiest apple, but I'm pretty excited about it. And there it is. Our one lone little apple. Good luck, little apple. Now in total, we have 10 apples here up in this line. This row of trees lines up along the shape of our driveway, and I can't wait until they are all blooming and gorgeous as these trees mature. For now, we just keep trying to protect them from the deer and hopefully the Japanese beetles. And in the future, we're going to have an abundant harvest of apples, not only for ourselves, but also for the deer here on the farm. Now another important part of our garden is our apiary, and I'm not very close to it. I'm still standing in that row of apple trees, but right up there on the hillside you can see the beginning of our apiary. Now it's just 4 boxes right now, but once we move here in the fall, we will be bringing the rest of the bees, and the apiary will be quite large. Now it's late in the evening. It's almost 8 o'clock. Sunset is within the half hour. So we don't see a lot of activity as the bees are going to bed. But they've been working hard to do their job. We harvested our first Kentucky honey this year. 45 pounds of wonderful Kentucky honey. The fields are full of flowers. There's yarrow, wild onions, elderberry. There's mullein, nettles, milkweed. So many gorgeous plants in this field. Now in the future, our house is going to be on the top of that hill.
And these are our blackberries that I purchased from somebody in town, the thornless. I believe they are, I have to look up the name again. Anyway, it's right alongside our driveway. Still have the blackberries trying to come up wild after we did all this work on our driveway. But you can see we've got some that are pretty good size. I'm gonna yank that one. I'm not gonna eat it, but I'm gonna replant it. There's a good monster one right there. I just planted these off of a couple little slips that I purchased locally, and I think it's only been 2.5 months, maybe 3 months. I'll have to look back on the timeline, but they've already shot right up. This one I'm looking at here, it's about 1.5 feet tall, but if you spread out the limbs, it's about 4 feet long. So they're doing very well. Again, to capture a lot of this water that's coming off the hill, might as well go ahead and use it to our advantage. We get a lot of runoff. We technically have another little pond up in here that catches water.
Now I told you that when we garden here in Kentucky, I call this gardening on grace. And the reason is we plant a garden and we walk away. We're not around to tend it. And as a result, my garden is going to make you feel better about your garden at home, no matter how weedy it is, because this is the ugly part of the garden at Kowalski Mountain. It is overrun. Now, Philip really wanted to put weed cloth down, and I resisted, and only because we didn't have enough time. And if you remember, I told you I didn't really want to plant a garden here. We were running out of time. We had a lot of potatoes to plant, and I just wanted to get the job done. And the weeds have come in. So we have spent quite a bit of time here. Last night, Philip and I spent about 5 hours weeding, and he spent time earlier this week weeding as well. Now, we've unearthed quite a bit of our garden, and surprisingly, it's doing pretty good. Let's go check it out. Now, out here in this garden, we have 2.5 rows of potatoes. There are Kennebec potatoes, which are our absolute favorite. There are red potatoes, or there were red potatoes. And there are russet. Now last night while we were weeding out here, Philip accidentally punctured a red potato with the pitchfork. And I'm like, what are you waiting for? And we decided to go ahead and harvest the red potatoes. Now lucky enough, I had my camera with me and I have some great footage of that. So let's check it out.
There. Take the weeds out, I won't have to pull them out later. Here. By your foot. Ah, yeah. Let's say they were ready. Big mamma jamma.
Okay,
Partial.
it's like a little over half full, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's half full.
Yeah.
It's just off the ones that were ready, like the red potatoes, and then a few of these had died out because of bugs, so we pulled the Kennebec.
Yay, exciting.
The rest of them are still growing.
That's the first sizable harvest. Like we've grown things here before, but we've never harvested.
Well, not here. Yeah. At home we've got a lot more.
But here. Now in all we got over half full of a 5-gallon bucket of red potatoes, and those are on a curing rack now, which we will take home. Now we had decided some of the potatoes aren't looking very good on their leaves, and we thought we would go ahead and harvest them as well, but they weren't ready, so we stopped, and we're going to let those potatoes go a little bit longer. So we still have at least 2 rows of potatoes to harvest here. So we should have plentiful potatoes for the rest of the year. Now over here we have some corn. Now the corn, I really had to dig for it, but it is doing its best to survive in this weed. And I was able to get quite a bit of it weeded. Now we actually go home to Florida tomorrow. So the rest of the garden is not going to be able to get any more attention. It's going to really continue as it is. Now we also found in the garden there are some plants that came back, some volunteer plants. We've planted this part of the garden for years. We found some plants that we had put into our deer food plots before, turnips and something else. I'm pretty sure they're turnips that are growing back, volunteer plants that have returned from a previous year planted. Now this site will be our main garden, which is our plan, but here, because we are planning to grow not only our own food, but food for our animals, we will have multiple garden plots to be able to do that. Now these are the Kennebec potatoes. These are our favorite. And hopefully we're going to get a bountiful harvest of Kennebecs. We've got this one little section of tall corn. We're not quite sure why.
Better soil.
Should be the same. Let's see if you can see what we dug out. Can you see the potato plants? This is how the whole thing looked when we started. There's a potato right there. This is another one of those volunteer plants from the food plot. There's a potato there. Now I've got a small blackberry patch right over here near the garden. And our blackberry cobbler was so good, I want to freeze some to take home. I'm going to head back up the hill to go to the big blackberry patch. Now this is not the big blackberry patch, but this is the patch that's along the creek, and I thought I'd stop by and see what there was. Now earlier I mentioned that we are between rainstorms. I am wearing the highest fashion of footwear for this very special garden tour, which is fixing to be unveiled. Unfortunately, this patch has been hit really hard by the Japanese beetles, so there are some berries in there, but since I have shorts on, I don't want to climb into the bushes. These are wild blackberries. They are not thornless, and I don't want to get scratched. Now hopefully, I had to walk through some high grass to get here. I mean, I didn't actually have to, but I didn't want to walk all the way down the hill and then all the way back up, so I went through the high grass. Hopefully that's going to work out okay for me. So this is the big blackberry patch here on the homestead, and while these are completely wild berries, we do take care of it. I groomed this heavily a year or two ago. Butchered it up. I have video of that. I'll be sure to put that up here. But it has recovered beautifully and come back, and that's exactly what I wanted to do. And Philip also fertilizes this to give it a boost. Now this is a really nice wet part of the field, and the blackberries are just beautiful here. We've already enjoyed some blackberry cobbler, and I'm doing a video about that. I have no idea what order I'm going to edit these videos. I think I'm going to make an entire playlist of all the videos that I create from the summer workation, and I'll be sure to put that up here. Now behind me in this blackberry patch, I also just learned, my daughter spotted it and said we have elderberry. That is so exciting. I had no idea that we have elderberry here on the farm. And so I'll be learning all I can so that I can share that with you. Well, friends, this is our last day on the homestead. We head home tomorrow. I want to pick these berries so that I can take them home in the freezer so that we can enjoy some blackberry cobbler on another day. Friends, as always, we appreciate you watching, and I hope you've enjoyed this very special, very first garden tour here on the homestead at Kowalski Mountain. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, hit that button. We'd love for you to be a part of the Kowalski Mountain family. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. I'm going to turn the camera on in hopes you can see the fireflies. They're just starting to come out. Well, I have about worn out my time. I can hear that rumbling behind me, and those clouds are getting closer. Time to get back to the RV.